Canine German Shepherd was tied to a flooded house by his owner. Then, a soldier appeared and did this. The storm had already swallowed most of the town when rescue crews began evacuating what was left. Trees were torn from the ground. Streets had turned to rivers. And inside one collapsing home, a canine German Shepherd was chained to a broken pipe, left behind, trembling, as the water rose higher by the hour. His owner had vanished. No note, no intention of returning. The dog's cries were drowned by thunder. His strength was fading. But just when hope seemed gone, a soldier, stranger to this dog, yet moved by something deep, rushed into the ruins and did something no one expected. What happened next will stay with you forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Across the quiet town of Hammond, Louisiana, streets were no longer streets. They were muddy canals, swallowing everything. Mailboxes, front porches, memories. It was supposed to be a mild storm. That's what they'd said. But now it was a disaster, and no one had time to question how it got this bad so fast. At the edge of a narrow street, where water had climbed halfway up the mailbox and pushed through the cracked foundations of old homes, there stood a single-story house. Neglected, already half submerged. Inside that house, tied to a metal pipe in what used to be a laundry room, was a canine German Shepherd named Rocco. His fur was soaked, clinging to his ribs. His paws trembled with exhaustion. He hadn't eaten in a day. The water was now licking his legs. Soon it would reach his chest. And after that, he knew. He'd once served in the police force, trained for emergencies, loyal to a fault. But when his human partner was killed on duty, he'd been retired and handed off to someone else. A man who didn't understand him. A man who thought having a tough dog would make him seem stronger. But that man was gone now, evacuated without even glancing back at the leash tied tight to the pipe. Rocco whimpered, not out of fear, but confusion. His world was rules and obedience. He'd followed every command. Why had he been left? Outside, the rescue crews had passed by twice already, too focused on helping stranded families to notice one dog in a half-collapsed house, until a third vehicle, a military Humvee, rattled into view. Inside it was Sergeant Marcus Lee, 33, U.S. Army, just returned from an overseas deployment. He'd volunteered to help with evacuations while on leave. For him, floods and war zones weren't so different. People were scared. Lives were at risk, and every second mattered. As the Humvee crawled past the drowning house, something made Marcus stop. "Wait," he said to the driver, peering through the rain. The driver slowed. "Something wrong?" Marcus squinted. There it was again. A shadow behind broken glass. Movement. Not human, but not random. He jumped out, boots splashing hard into the rising water. "Sergeant!" the driver called after him. "That structure's not safe." But Marcus wasn't listening. Something in his gut had twisted the moment he locked eyes with that shape in the window. He pushed through the front door, shoulder first, as water poured out in a foul, cold rush. Inside, the stench of mildew and gasoline mixed with silence. The house creaked. It was ready to collapse. That's when he heard it. A bark, weak, but sharp enough to matter. "Hello?" Marcus called, his voice echoing. Another bark, then a whine. He moved fast, pushing open door after door, until he found it. The laundry room, water up to his thighs, and a German Shepherd trying to keep his chin above the rising surface. The leash was so tight around the pipe, it had torn into the dog's neck. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered. He stepped into the room carefully, kneeling despite the water, and reached into his pocket for his multi-tool. The dog growled, defensive, confused, but Marcus didn't flinch. "Easy, boy," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get you out." Rocco stared into the soldier's eyes. Something passed between them. Recognition of pain, of loss, of purpose. The leash snapped free. Rocco collapsed against Marcus's chest, too weak to stand on his own. Marcus scooped him up, gritting his teeth as he waded back toward the door. The moment they hit the front porch, a loud crack echoed through the structure. The roof buckled. "Move!" someone shouted. Marcus ran, holding the dog tight, as the house gave way behind them, crashing into itself like a dying beast. They made it to the Humvee just in time. Rocco's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, eyes locked on the man who saved him. And Marcus, still catching his breath, said one sentence that would mark the beginning of everything that followed. "You're not going back there again. Ever." Rocco lay motionless in the back of the Humvee, his body wrapped in an emergency blanket, his breaths slow and raspy. Marcus knelt beside him, one hand gently pressed over the dog's ribcage to monitor his breathing. The Humvee bounced through waterlogged roads, dodging debris, passing shattered fences and upturned cars. The destruction of the storm unfolding around them, but Marcus only saw the dog. "He's not just some backyard pet," Marcus muttered to himself. "He's been trained. He served." The rescue center they arrived at was a repurposed high school gym, now flooded with families, supplies, and noise. Chaos. As Marcus carried Rocco through the crowded hall, people turned to look, some backing away, others staring with sympathy. The once proud German Shepherd looked broken now, but there was something in his eyes that made people pause. A presence. A story waiting to be told. A volunteer vet named Ellie approached, her eyes wide. "Is he hurt?" "Nearly drowned, starved." "Abandoned," Marcus said. "He's a retired canine, tied to a pipe in a flooded house." Ellie knelt and gently examined him. This leash mark on his neck, tight and raw. "He's dehydrated and hypoglycemic, but we can help him." Marcus nodded. "Do it." The vet gestured to an empty cot set up near the back of the gym. "He can stay here while we stabilize him. Do you know his name?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't, but I'll find out." He stood back as Ellie and her assistants worked on Rocco, hydrating him, warming him, checking his heartbeat. Rocco never took his eyes off Marcus. Even when weak, even when surrounded by strangers, the dog watched only him. By the next morning, Rocco could sit up. Barely. But it was something. Marcus returned to the cot with a fresh towel, a bowl of water, and a sandwich he didn't plan to eat. "You're lucky," he said, kneeling beside the dog. "You got out just in time." Rocco lifted his head, licking Marcus's hand with a dry tongue. A flicker of trust. "I've seen what it looks like when soldiers are left behind," Marcus whispered. "I won't let that happen to you." He checked Rocco's tags again. The collar was faded, but one piece of information was still legible. Rocco, K9, Unit 473, Baton Rouge, PD. He tapped into his phone, digging into local police records. 10 minutes later, he found it. Rocco had served 3 years on the force, trained in detection, pursuit, and protection. He'd been paired with Officer Darren Hobbs, killed in the line of duty 6 months ago. After that, Rocco had been retired, adopted by Hobbs's cousin, a man named Brent who lived in Hammond. Brent had listed himself as Rocco's guardian. No updates since. Marcus stared at the screen, jaw clenched. He had questions, lots of them. Later that day, Marcus approached one of the emergency team leaders. "I need an address and contact info for a Brent Hobbs." The man raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because he left a trained canine tied to a pipe in a flood zone." That was all Marcus had to say. With the info in hand, he made the call. Brent didn't answer. So, Marcus drove. It took over an hour through water-damaged roads, but eventually he reached the address, a 2-story house on higher ground, untouched by the flood. Brent opened the door in gym shorts, holding a beer. When he saw the soldier standing at his porch, his smug grin faded. "You Brent Hobbs?" "Yeah. Who's asking?" Marcus stepped closer. "I found your dog. Tied. Alone. Half dead." Brent scoffed. "That mutt? He was a headache. All commands, no fun. I figured someone would find him or not. Not my problem anymore." Marcus didn't move, but his jaw tightened. "You don't deserve him." Brent laughed, taking a sip. "What are you gonna do? Adopt him yourself?" Marcus didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. That night, back at the shelter, Marcus sat beside Rocco again. "Your old life's gone," he said quietly. "But if you want, I can give you a new one." Rocco blinked, head resting on Marcus's boot, and for the first time in days, his tail moved, just slightly, but enough to say, yes. The days that followed passed in a blur of exhaustion and quiet repair. Rocco remained on the cot in the corner of the gym-turned-shelter, but he was no longer just another rescue. Everyone noticed the difference. He watched people read movement tensed when strangers got too close to Marcus. His instincts were intact, even after all he had endured. Marcus visited him every morning, noon and night. He brought food, sat with him in silence, read reports aloud just to fill the space, talked to him like he would a battle buddy. Not a dog, a partner. But Rocco wasn't healing as fast as Marcus hoped. He still didn't eat unless Marcus fed him by hand. He rarely barked, and he never ventured more than a few feet from his cot. Trauma lingered in his eyes, pain Marcus knew too well. "Come on, boy," Marcus coaxed one morning. "You've been through worse. You made it out. You're safe now." Rocco blinked slowly, but didn't move. The vet, Ellie, approached quietly. "He trusts you, but he's not sure if he trusts the world again." Marcus looked at her. "What does he need?" "Consistency, patience, and maybe a reason to fight again." Later that day, Marcus stood by the exit doors, Rocco beside him on a loose leash. They'd managed a slow walk across the gym, the first in 3 days. A little boy nearby pointed, eyes wide. "Mommy? Look, a hero dog." Marcus smiled faintly, but Rocco flinched at the shout. His tail dropped. He stepped behind Marcus's leg, breathing quickening. "It's okay," Marcus whispered. "You're okay." That night, Marcus made a choice. He wasn't going back to his hotel. He rolled out a sleeping bag beside Rocco's cot, laid down, and rested his head next to the shepherd's side. It was a quiet gesture, but it mattered. By dawn, Marcus woke to the soft press of Rocco's paw on his arm. The dog had curled beside him during the night. The wall was cracking. That morning, Marcus took Rocco outside for the first time. The air still smelled like mold and mud. Trees were down. Birds barely sang. But the sky was blue again. And that was enough. Marcus tossed a tennis ball across the small grass patch behind the school. Rocco just stared. Then, without warning, he limped after it, clumsy, weak, but determined. He brought it back and dropped it at Marcus's feet. Marcus knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dog's shoulders. "There you are," he said quietly. "That's the soldier I knew was still in there." That same afternoon, Marcus returned to the shelter office. He placed a set of papers on the table in front of the coordinator. Signed. Filed. Complete. "Adoption request?" the coordinator asked. Marcus nodded. "It's not a request. It's a promise." The coordinator glanced at the paperwork. "You do know what you're getting into, right? Older dog, medical needs, psychological scars." Marcus met his gaze. So do I. As the sun set that day, Rocco walked beside Marcus through the battered streets of Hammond. People still swept porches and cleared debris. Kids rode bikes through puddles. Life, fragile but stubborn, was returning. And for the first time since the flood, Rocco lifted his nose to the wind, closed his eyes, and let it carry through his fur. A second chance. That night, back in Marcus's truck, as they left the shelter behind and began the drive to a quieter place outside town, Marcus glanced into the rearview mirror. Rocco was sprawled across the back seat, finally asleep, deep and peaceful. And Marcus knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. But neither of them were prepared for what the next week would bring, because not everyone had forgotten about Rocco's past, and someone was watching. The countryside just outside of Hammond was a world away from the flooded ruins Marcus and Rocco had escaped. Green fields stretched under a pale blue sky. Birds returned to the trees. Neighbors waved as Marcus passed by in his battered pickup truck. It was quiet, peaceful, the perfect place to heal. Or so Marcus thought. He had rented a small farmhouse with a wide porch and a big backyard. The kind of place that felt temporary, but safe enough for now. The first night there, Marcus laid out a bed for Rocco by the fireplace. The dog sniffed every corner of the house cautiously, tail low, but wagging slightly when Marcus called him. They were building something, day by day. Trust, routine, the fragile beginnings of a real life. Every morning they ran together along the dirt road by the farm. Rocco still limped slightly, but with every step, his strength returned. His coat grew shinier. His eyes, once hollow, now watched the world with curiosity again. Marcus even started retraining him gently. Simple commands. Sit, stay, come. Rocco responded like muscle memory, like he had been waiting for someone to remind him who he was. But the past has a way of finding you, even when you think you've outrun it. One afternoon, after a long walk, Marcus pulled into the driveway and immediately knew something was wrong. The front door was ajar. Marcus stiffened, one hand instinctively reaching for the small pistol he kept tucked behind the truck seat. He glanced at Rocco, who stood frozen, ears pinned back, hackles rising. "Stay," Marcus whispered. He crept toward the house, every instinct on high alert. Inside, the living room was a mess. Couch cushions slashed, cabinet doors swinging open, paperwork scattered across the floor. Someone had been searching for something, and they hadn't been subtle. Marcus moved methodically from room to room, clearing the house. Empty. Whoever had been there was gone now, but they had left a message. On the wall, scrawled in black spray paint above the fireplace, were 3 words. He still owes. Marcus's jaw tightened. It wasn't a random break-in. Someone from Rocco's old life, someone who thought the dog was still a piece of property, a tool, a debt unpaid, was coming back to claim him. He turned to find Rocco standing in the doorway, body rigid, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. "It's okay," Marcus said, voice steady. "Not today." He packed essentials into a duffel bag in minutes. Food, water, first aid, Rocco's leash and medical papers. Before they left, Marcus took one last look at the vandalized wall. He wasn't just protecting Rocco now, he was going to fight for him. They hit the road as twilight bled across the sky, taking back roads Marcus knew from childhood, heading deeper into the countryside where cell service was spotty and strangers stood out. Rocco rode silently beside him, every so often pressing his head against Marcus's arm as if to say, "I'm still here." They found a small, run-down motel off an abandoned highway exit. Marcus paid cash, kept his truck parked under a thick oak tree, out of sight. Inside the room, he placed a chair against the door and laid his pistol on the nightstand. Rocco curled up by the bed, eyes never fully closing, always watching. As Marcus lay in the dark, listening to the hollow groan of the wind outside, He couldn't help but wonder, who exactly had Rocco been tied to before? What unfinished business had they just inherited? And how far would those shadows go to take him back? The night stretched long and heavy, and as Marcus finally drifted into a restless sleep, Rocco stirred by the door, ears twitching at something moving in the darkness beyond the parking lot. Something or someone was still hunting them. The sun hadn't yet risen when Rocco bolted upright, hackles raised, growling deep in his throat. Marcus opened his eyes instantly. "What is it?" he whispered, reaching for the pistol on the nightstand. He moved silently toward the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to look out. A shadow moved at the edge of the parking lot, too slow to be a passerby, too deliberate to be ignored. Marcus clenched his jaw. Whoever it was, they had found them. He turned to Rocco, who stood at the door, eyes sharp and fixed. "Stay with me, partner," Marcus said, just loud enough for the dog to hear. They waited in silence. A soft tap on the motel door. Then a voice, calm, confident, and uninvited. "Mr. Lee, we're not here to hurt anyone. We just want what belongs to us." Marcus didn't answer. "You've got a dog that's part of an open contract," the man continued. "A lot of money was spent on him. That dog's not yours." Rocco growled again, louder this time. The man chuckled. "See? He remembers." Marcus opened the door slightly, the chain still secured. Outside stood Oud in a gray suit, clean-shaven, mid-40s, with eyes that didn't blink enough. Two more men stood behind him, one with a visible shoulder holster. "I don't care what paperwork you think you have," Marcus said coldly. "He's mine now. You abandoned him, left him to die." The man tilted his head. "No, we repositioned him. He wasn't useful anymore until now. You made him useful again." Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't about Rocco's past in law enforcement. This was something deeper, darker. "You trained him," Marcus said slowly, eyes narrowing. "Not just for detection. You trained him for something else." The man smiled thinly. "You're a smart soldier." "You used him. He was a valuable asset. He completed tasks most men couldn't stomach. Now we need him again." Marcus's grip on the pistol tightened. "He's not a weapon. He's not a tool. He's a living being. And he's mine." The man's smile vanished. "This isn't a choice, Sergeant. We know where you live. We know where your family lives. If you want to keep them safe." Marcus slammed the door. 2 seconds later, a bullet shattered the front window. Rocco lunged with a bark that shook the walls. Marcus dove low, dragging the mattress over for cover as more shots fired. Glass exploded, wood splintered, chaos. Rocco didn't flinch. He stood in front of Marcus, barking furiously, refusing to back down. Then came silence. When Marcus peeked again, the men were gone, vanished into the early light like ghosts. But the message had been delivered. This wouldn't stop. They hadn't come to talk. They'd come to take. By noon, Marcus had called in a favor, an old friend from his military days, now working in federal law enforcement. "You're dealing with ex-private contractors?" the friend said over the encrypted line. "They've got dirty history and worse connections. No real names, no real files, and the dog? If he was trained in Black Ops, they won't let him go without a fight." Marcus looked down at Rocco, who now lay beside him, head resting on his boots, chest rising and falling. "They'll have to go through me." There was a pause on the other end. "Then you'd better disappear, fast, and take that dog with you." That night, Marcus packed only what mattered. Clothes. Money. Rocco's medical records. A small folder of photos, his late father, his old unit, a younger version of himself he barely remembered. They drove west, into the mountains of New Mexico, where Marcus knew people who asked no questions and gave safe shelter to those who needed it. As they crossed the state line, Rocco sat tall in the passenger seat, ears perked, eyes forward. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But neither of them knew. The worst had yet to come. The air in northern New Mexico was crisp and clean. Nothing like the thick, damp heat they'd left behind in Louisiana. Pines towered above the winding roads. Wind whistled softly through the valleys. It was the kind of quiet Marcus hadn't known in years. He parked the truck at a secluded cabin near Red River, an off-grid property owned by his former commanding officer, now retired and living in Canada. It was well-stocked, secure, and, most importantly, unknown to the outside world. Rocco leapt from the truck with more energy than Marcus had seen since the flood. His gait was stronger, his body filled out from proper meals and rest. The limp had faded almost completely, but Marcus knew physical recovery was only half the battle. That evening, as the fire crackled inside the cabin, Marcus set down 2 bowls. One for himself, one for Rocco. The dog ate quickly now, no longer needing hand feeding. A small thing, but a sign of progress. "You're not just surviving anymore," Marcus said aloud. "You're coming back to life." He leaned back, sipping coffee, watching the dog stretch out beside the fireplace. The rhythm of life had returned. Days were filled with trail walks, training drills, and long silences that didn't need to be broken. Nights were safer now, quiet, calm. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to believe they were free. But freedom has a price. On the 5th night at the cabin, Marcus woke with a jolt. Rocco was barking, furiously, not panic. Defense, warning. Marcus grabbed his pistol and rushed to the window. Nothing. No lights, no movement. Just darkness pressing against the glass. But Rocco stood rigid by the door, staring into the woods. Growling low, Marcus whispered, "What do you see?" They waited in silence. Then, crunch. A single footstep on dry leaves. Marcus aimed into the trees. "If you're here, come out." No response. He stepped onto the porch, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. His beam swept through the woods, empty. But as he turned back toward the cabin, he saw it. A symbol carved into the front door. 3 lines. Clean, precise, burned into the wood. It was the same mark Rocco had worn on the inside of his service collar, the one Marcus hadn't noticed until a few days earlier. A unit insignia Marcus couldn't trace. A group that didn't officially exist. They had found them. The next day, Marcus contacted his old friend again. "We're being tracked," he said bluntly. "I don't know how, but they're marking us." The voice on the other end was tense. "You need to make a decision, Marcus. Either you go public, expose what you found out about them, or you keep running forever. They won't stop until they have him." Marcus looked at Rocco, sitting by the cabin window, alert, waiting for a command. "I'm not running anymore." He hung up. Over the following days, Marcus prepared. He reinforced the cabin doors, set up motion sensors, cameras. He trained Rocco daily, not just for obedience but for defense, search, tracking, the skills he'd been born to use. And Rocco responded with purpose, as if part of him had waited for this, to be needed, trusted, challenged. Their bond deepened. Rocco no longer flinched at loud noises. He slept at Marcus's feet, followed commands without hesitation. But more than that, he chose to stay close. He wasn't obeying. He was choosing his place. Marcus realized something he hadn't expected. Rocco was no longer a mission. He was family. One night, while sitting by the fire, Marcus whispered, "You know, they called you an asset. A tool, but you're more human than half the people I've served with." Rocco rested his head in Marcus's lap. That night, for the first time in weeks, they both slept without waking. But peace doesn't last forever. As dawn broke over the mountains, Marcus's phone vibrated with a message from a blocked number. "We found you. Give him back, or watch everything you love burn." Marcus stared at the screen. His hands trembled. Not from fear, but from rage. They had drawn the line, and he was ready to cross it. They came at night. 4 men, silencers, precision, but Marcus was ready. The cabin lights stayed off as planned. Rocco waited by the back door, perfectly still, trained, focused. His ears twitched at every sound. When the first intruder stepped onto the porch, Marcus moved. 2 shots. Rocco lunged into the dark, taking down a second attacker before the man could scream. By dawn, it was over. 3 men bound, 1 unconscious. The 4th fled into the woods, wounded and afraid. The authorities arrived later, alerted by Marcus's contact. The men were identified, mercenaries from a blacklisted private firm. No names, no records, but they left behind proof, enough for federal agents to act. Rocco stood tall beside Marcus, his head high, tail still. No longer a discarded canine, no longer a victim, but a warrior, a survivor. And Marcus? He looked down at Rocco, placed a hand on his head, and whispered, "You're home now."